But what caused the financial success was not extreme ability. I have a good mind, but I'm way short of prodigy. And I've had results in life that are prodigious. And that came from tricks. I just learned a few basic tricks from people like my grandfather.
What were those tricks?
What kind of?
Charlie, welcome to our Redlands family.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
I always like these awkward moments.
I know. You're supposed to start.
Oh, I'm supposed to start. Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen, this is an amazing evening. I've had the pleasure to spend, I think, 3 times with Charlie, 4 times. Once at his house in Hancock Park, and then from time to time he comes to Redlands. Isn't that amazing? So I'll simply start with an interesting question. I think it's an interesting question. Charlie, you have investments in a lot of places like Mill Valley and Santa Barbara, and you live in Hancock Park, and sometimes you say that Pasadena is your second home, and then you have various investments around Claremont, and now investing here in Redlands. Why are you investing in Redlands? What do you think about Redlands? I mean, what is it that attracts you here? I mean, I can see a kind of pattern there: Santa Barbara, Mill Valley, Pasadena, Claremont, and Redlands. So what is it, Charlie?
Well, I have a natural prejudice for this area because when I was at Caltech in 1943, I used to hang around here. My first wife went to Scripps College, and my sister went to Scripps College. And so I'm very familiar with this area. And of course, I've interfaced with a lot of the people who love these universities out here.
Yes.
And so I started with I always liked the orange trees against the mountains and the snow-capped whatever. So I started with a deep prejudice.
Yes.
But my investments here happened by accident. What happened was I live in a neighborhood which the Hasidic Jews sort of came into a few decades ago, a very successful group of people. And one day into my house, a very young 17-year-old Hasidic Jew came by and gave me the Hebrew Bible in Hebrew. And, Munger sounds like it could be a German Jewish name, and it means peddler in both German and English. So it wasn't totally crazy for an Hasidic Jew to think that Munger could read the Hebrew Bible in Hebrew, but of course I couldn't. And I got to talking with him, and one thing led to another, and I sort of befriended Avi and watched him grow up. And Avi never went to college. He has a mild attention deficit disorder, but a ferociously high IQ. And he was worried about it. And I said, Avi, don't worry about it. You don't need any college. You're going to succeed mightily. Well, Avi is now 32 and has 4 children and a hugely successful business. And I was right. He didn't need college.
And Avi's sitting right there. Stand up, Avi.
Yes, stand. Wave to the crowd. And Avi had a client, his main client in his apartment management business, and he was unhappy. And I think rightly so. And so I said to him one day, because I'd gotten to like and trust Avi, I said, why don't you just get rid of that client you got and buy a bunch of apartments for me? And the first ones we saw were the ones I bought out here. And that's how it happened.
And by the way, they're at the end of Alabama, those beautiful apartments. Yeah, they're really amazing. Yeah.
Parkview
Terrace.
Terrace.
Great. I think half of the occupants of those apartments work at AS3. So one day I'm sitting there and he calls me and he says, could I come out and talk to you? Of course, I didn't exactly know who Charlie was. I said, sure, yeah, okay. And that's what began this friendship, actually. Amazing.
But we've had a fair amount of fun, Avi and his partner, Ruben and I. And it's kind of creative to buy old apartments and fix them up. And of course, we have a philosophy that there is no income unless the place is properly cared for. And the apartment management field is full of people who just milk the properties and do the very minimum. And that's a stupid mistake if you're a long-term investor. And Avi and I share a belief that all these things should be immediately improved. And I think in the first, year or something like that, we spent $600,000 on trees on just 4 projects.
He's got my heart right there.
Yeah. I was going to say, was that a planted question?
No,
it was not a planted
it was not. And, but
Oh, Larry.
But Jack, you're probably doing it out of love, and I know how much better it's going to work for me, so I don't deserve much credit because it's very much in my interest financially to plant all those trees. Now, I would probably plant them anyway, but I can't prove that. At any rate, that's how we came out here, and of course I like the mountains, and I like the trees, and I like the people, and I like these good colleges. I didn't start out with the idea I'd picked Redlands out of the world. It's just where this apartment project that caught my attention was. But once I was here, I did not know there was an Esri company. I have made my way in life with a pencil and a pen and a calculating machine and a compound interest table, and I haven't looked at a calculus question since I was 19 years old. So I'm totally a creature of old-fashioned horse sense and a little arithmetic. And so I don't know about software companies like Esri. And so if I'd known, I would have paid more for the project.
That's good.
You know, it's a huge blessing to go into community. There's a big employer that keeps hiring and so forth. And Avi is so smart. I didn't suggest that he start giving. There are all kinds of rules in apartment house operators about guarantees of leases and down payments and what have you. And not every new employee of Esri qualifies. And Avi just took one look at the situation and he waives all those requirements for anybody that wants to work at Esri.
Thank you, Avi. I really appreciate that.
Well, but there again, he doesn't deserve any credit. That's a smart business trick. So he doesn't know whether he's being nice or being greedy. I don't. Whatever. I like these things where a confluence of 2 factors is working in the right direction.
Yeah.
But I happen to think I share Jack's interest in design and architecture, which is an absolute accident. My uncle was a graduate of the Harvard School of Architecture, and I am a graduate of the Harvard Law School. And I have done a fair amount of house building for myself and building projects of various kinds in my long life. And so it's kind of a hobby with me to do what Jack does sort of professionally. And so, of course, man, I see this beautiful campus and this very successful company. And I'm also a total nut on the subject that the best way to get what you want in life is to deserve what you want. And, of course, if you apply that to business, that means you really take care of the customers. And it's perfectly obvious that what's happened to Esri would not have happened if it weren't terribly good at taking care of the customers. And, of course, that's, again, I don't deserve any credit for doing it. I know I make more money taking care of the customers than I would if I were more short-term operating. And so I don't want to masquerade as a better fellow than I am because since it works so well, I don't think it'd be nice if I were like Mother Teresa and do something I didn't like doing. Because I'm a noble soul, but my life is organized so that just time after time, what works for my pocketbook works for every moral teaching that I've been taught.
Yeah.
And anybody in such a position is very lucky. And you people who work for a company like Esri are hugely lucky too, because there are a lot of employers that are defective.
One of the things I have as a question is, you have acquired many companies, you and Warren together in your career. You've looked at probably thousands. What's the kind of philosophy that you have determining what's a good company and what's not a good company? And I'm not suggesting that you've had perfect success in all of your acquisitions, because I know you haven't. You told me that. But what is your sort of philosophical rule base for when you're looking at organizations to invest in or acquire?
Well, we have a very peculiar way of looking at things. We want to buy something that's intrinsically a very good business, meaning that an idiot could run it and it would do all right. And then we want that business, which an idiot could run successfully, to have a wonderful person in it running it. And if we have a wonderful business with a wonderful person running it, that really turns us on, and it works very well. And now we do make exceptions, but not many. And it's a pretty simple philosophy. Warren sometimes says you have to choose good person or good business. You know what he says? This is not politically correct. He says good business. He wants something that has such tremendous strength. I had a friend when I practiced law, and he said, if it won't stand a little mismanagement, it's not much of a business. And we like businesses that stand a lot of mismanagement but don't get it. So that's our formula. And we can't make it work perfectly, but it certainly worked better than most people's methods have been. And we reject some wonderful businesses with some wonderful people where it's just too tough.
Yeah.
And I took on once, I've been so lucky in life that I took on once a job of being chairman of a nonprofit hospital because it was a losing hand. Too many competitors, too weak a position. It had a lot of terrible defects. And I said, this is good for me. Expose myself to the disappointments of the real world. And I want to tell you, it was 40 years of mixed agony and pleasure. and the agony never went away. It was, if the business is tough enough, it has a way of staying tough. As Warren says that when a business with a reputation for being tough and a manager with an opportunity for being brilliant get together, he says it's the reputation of the business that remains. And if they start tough, they stay tough. Yeah. It's really hard to change a whole business or a person. Lots of luck if you're disappointed in one of your children.
You started. Yeah. One time you mentioned that you have a particular way of making deals with people, your friends, business deals. Could you sort of express that to this crowd? Your sort of philosophy about. Do you try to win at all costs, or what is your?
No.
What do you do?
Again, what really works in life is win-win, and that requires some sensitivity to the other fellow's way of thinking and his needs too. But win-win is the only formula that really will work on and on and on. And when it really starts working, when two people trust each other, imagine. Take an operating theater at the Mayo Clinic. The whole damn group trusts one another. There's not a lot of lawyers or, they just know what to do and when to do it and who to call on for what help, and everybody does what they're supposed to and so on. So we're trying to get these win-win relations, and of course I see it all the time. Costco has this reputation. I'm a director of Costco, and Costco has this reputation of being a fairly tough buyer. I don't regard them as that tough. There are a lot of people who are rich as small suppliers of Costco. But Costco is into win-win, and that's what really works.
Yeah, it's win-win with their customers, but it's also win-win with their suppliers, and it's also win-win with their employees.
Absolutely. Everybody has to win-win. Yeah. And Peter Kaufman, whom you know well, is just...
Peter was here a few weeks ago. Did anybody see Peter? He's a close friend of...
Well, Peter's the ultimate win-win operator, and the last person I want to compete with in life is Peter. He just takes such good care of the customers. I've never heard any complaint from Peter's customers except that his price is high. Everything else about the business is perfect.
Larry, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I don't want to totally, but I'm going to change it from the subjects you've been asking, Jack. and forewarning, spoiler alert, we talked about this backstage. I think you have a surprising take on a question that I was asking about philanthropy in this country, and you gave an analysis that to me was quite unexpected that I wasn't really thinking about. So can I have you?
Yeah, I'm glad to repeat it. What I have noticed in my life is that in Europe, they do not have American philanthropy. It's just different. The only country in Europe where the people give heavily and routinely the way we do in America is Holland. And they were fighting the North Sea together.
Right.
35% of Holland is under sea level. And they really had to help one another with the dikes and so forth. And in America, we had the pioneers taking away the country from hostilities and danger and bad climate and so forth. And everybody had to help everybody else. So I think that both Holland and the United States were helped with a big tradition of philanthropy by the common hardship. And I think it's a great strength that we have in America. And if any of us were transplanted to Italy or France or Germany, we'd feel we're among the most selfish people.
Yeah.
They just don't have much of a tradition of giving. And I don't know about you, but my involvement with charitable activities has been a big part of my life. And I think I'm better for it, and I've had a better life. So I think they're missing out.
How do you do it? I mean, what I've watched is you have a very specific set of things you do, and I'm totally charmed by it, but also interested in having you share it.
Well, not everybody is charmed by it because I get begging letters every day, and I just throw them in the wastebasket, particularly when they come from individuals I don't know, because I have a feeling if I started responding to those, I'd have nothing but letters. But I'm like everybody else. I have things that interest me more than other things. And I have done a lot of philanthropy where I've mixed my own ideas with my money. And my attitude there is a lot like what McNamara told the Chinese when he went over there when they were still mired in communism without Chinese characteristics. And McNamara says, we're giving you all this money from my World Bank. He says, but I want you to know something. He says, the ideas I'm promoting are going to help you a lot more than this enormous amount of money. And so it worked out. What a little free enterprise did when added to Chinese communism was take 800 million people up to a billion something people, and 80% of them were living in stoop labor and subsistence agriculture. They were living like the people of Central Africa live. And it wasn't all that many years, but with the Chinese have a big middle class and an average GDP of $10,000 a person instead of $300 a person.
It's transformed the world.
And the ideas were worth more. And you have to give the Chinese credit for, one of those old communists said, I don't care if the cat is black or white as long as it catches mice. They watched the Chinese man in Singapore take a malarial swamp and turn it into almost a paradise with a 70% Chinese population. And they're sitting there in this poverty and obscurity and no toilets and really very tough lives. And here is Singapore flourishing with its Chinese population. And that old communist says, I want to be like Singapore. And he made it happen. Now I think he deserves some credit. In my life, I think what happened in Singapore was one of the interesting bits of political science that ever happened in the history of the world. I would argue that Lee Kuan Yew is probably the greatest nation builder that ever built. Now, occasionally he would use a pretty tough method. When he took over, he was a very young man, and he needed an army. He was surrounded by a bunch of Muslims that hated him. And in fact, they'd spit him out. And he asked all the other nations of the world to please help him get an army, because the English just left and said, handle your own problem. And every nation in the world refused to help him but one, and that was Israel. And he said, how am I going to take military aid surrounded by Muslims who hate me from Israel?